Well, after Justin Trudeau made a wave of random allegations against India and the Narendra Modi government, India and Canada's relationship took a nosedive for the worse. Now, more than a year later, there are first indications of a possible reset, if we can call it that. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has invited Prime Minister Narendra Modi to G7 summit in Canada. Not only that, he has ignored criticism from Khalistanis and sections of the Canadian media who tried to corner him over Trudeau's unproven allegations. Prime Minister Narendra Modi too has spoken of working together with Canada to re-establish relationships with renewed vigour. Is this possible? Is this the focus that India and Canada can rework on? We definitely have to explore possibilities and chances, because India and Canada in the past have had a hot and cold relationship, but considering the large Indian diaspora in Canada, it is better for both the nations to get along. We'll talk about this. Joining us on the show is Ambassador KP Fabian, former diplomat, Mr. Adit Kothari, foreign affairs expert, with us on the program as well. Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, also joins me on the program. Last but by no means the least, Mr. Sanjay Lazar, CEO of AVLR's Consultants, analyst and author, also joins us on the program. Professor Nalapat, we've done enough shows, sir, to talk about how India and Canada basically threw punches at each other. Some of them hit, some of them missed. But the punches that India is complaining about were the ones that were below the belt. And those are the ones which were not corroborated. They were just, put out in thin air. And now it seems that the new Prime Minister, the new leader of Canada, comes in with the sane head, because he understands that getting along with India is not an option. It's a necessity. Professor Nalapat.
Yes, I fully agree with you, Vineet. I had high expectations from Mark Carney. I was a bit surprised that he seemed to be under the shadow of Justin Trudeau, who seemed completely set on demolishing the edifice of India-Canada relations for reasons that some of us have discussed, reasons that possibly are external to Canada. But Mark Carney had no such external factors bothering him. And so I was always very hopeful that he would take a pragmatic view of India. And pragmatic view means good relations with the world's most populous democracy and a very rapidly growing economy. As you correctly said, there's a very vibrant diaspora out there, and they're really doing tremendously good work, except for a few troublemakers who call themselves, I would like to call them the K group. There was the K group. They're all extremely productive citizens, and they do Canada proud, they do India proud for being ethnically of Indian origin. So I want to say, Vineet, I've been hopeful from the start that there would be a reset under Mark Carney. There was no chance of a reset under Justin Trudeau because certain externalities. But Mark Carney had no such impediments to have a good relationship with India. And I'm very happy to see that he has opened the door by inviting the Prime Minister to a G7, and the Prime Minister graciously accepted. I quite agree. That I think these kind of noises coming from a small group, amplified by two countries, both being neighbors of India, I think the Prime Minister is doing well to so far be dismissive and ignore them so far. And I hope the Canadian police are in hand, because these are violent people sometimes. And I'm sure the Canadian people are overall very good. But I hope the Canadian police, which have got a very good reputation, are overall very efficient, and they will see to it that no harm comes to any of the attendees at the G7 summit, including the invited guests. Thank you, Vinny.
Absolutely right, sir. Ambassador Fabian, the India-Canada relationship has taken a lot of beating in the last few years. This call by Mark Carney seems to be a light at the end of the tunnel. But it's important for India to make Canada understand as well that, the Khalistani elements and the people who have plotted against India or the state of India need to be held accountable by Canada, something which was not done under Justin Trudeau. In fact, the opposite was done.
Well, we have to understand a couple of things. One is that in the recent election, NDP, New Democratic Party, led by a pronounced, self-proclaimed pro-Khalistani, lost much political ground. Second is that Carney took a little while to send out the invitation. Third is that he made an interesting statement about the two countries having agreed to have frequent law enforcement dialogue, which is a good sign, because one of our complaints against Canada has been the law enforcement agency, especially the RCMP, has not been doing what it should be doing. If there are threats of violence against the Indian mission or Indian entities, well, it is for the RCMP to take action. And that has not been always the case. So let us hope there will be improvement and compliance with Canada's obligations under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. But having said that, I should add that I was reading in Globe and Mail that, what is his name? Sukh Dhaliwal. He is a Liberal Party MP from BC, British Columbia, and in his constituency is Surrey, where Niger was killed some time back. So he has protested against the invitation to extend it to Prime Minister Modi. So there are undercurrents, we should take note of them. And Mark Carney's party has not got a comfortable majority. So there are, all these factors, but basically it's the interest of Canada, it's in the interest of India to have a reset, and Mark Carney has done the right thing by extending the invitation, and we can expect Prime Minister Modi to make the relevant points, what we expect of Canada. All that we expect of Canada is that Khalistanis should not be permitted to threaten India, Indian missions and also other Indian entities, and any action which they take which violates Canadian law, well, they should be brought to justice. But let us see.
All right, fair enough, sir. Sanjay Lazar, India and Canada relationship. It's been a flashpoint, for the Western countries as well. Canada has tarnished or tried to tarnish India's image using a lot of bogus allegations. Do you think that despite this call for a reset, India has to ask Canada to set the record straight before we can, show that there is bonhomie once again between these two nations?
Thank you, Vineet, for having me. First of all, it's a great step by Canada and PM Mark Carney. Quite, out of left field. I never expected him to really go this far. But let's not kid ourselves. Let's understand. Like Ambassador Fabian said, it was a very late invitation. It was because of the pressure by other G7 nations who wanted India at the high table because they have strong trade and commerce relations. It's a large victory for India and the government. Let's also remember, I've just returned from Canada and Washington. I was on a speaking tour right across Canada. It's the 40th anniversary of the Kanishka bombing. I came across many Khalistanis during my visit there. Anita Anand and Dr. Jaishankar had a long engagement on the telephone last week, twice over the week. So it's already set the stage for something to happen. I do believe that this could turn the page on Indo-Canadian relations. Canada will have to keep the Khalistanis out and also stop persecution of Hindus and temples. We've seen desecration of our temples there, Hindu temples. And for India and Canada, the Niger issue, we should just let the law take its course. Let's see where it goes from here. I don't believe bonhomie will return overnight, but I do believe in the next 6 months, if things go well here, you could see restoration of, people-to-people movement plus the consular, interaction. We might have new consular, representatives both in Canada and in India. There's Canada needs our trade with Trump and the US fighting and tariffs. Canada needs India to buy gas. Canada needs India for nuclear civil energy, for agriculture, food grains. If you notice, China has just imposed a 100% tariff on split peas from Canada, whereas India has now extended its customs waiver. So, and we consume some of the largest, our dals, our pulses come from there. So, to Alberta and Saskatoon both supply a lot of this. India can also, earn by giving defense, iron, steel, a lot of the stuff that we do. So I think it's a great move. Bonhomie, not yet, but icebreaker, certainly. I look forward to Prime Minister Modi's visit there.
Adit, your thoughts on how this relationship could be revived? Obviously, India has to be very wary. India has to, in fact, look at this as perhaps a stepping stone towards some sort of a reset. The fact of the matter is that the animosity and the aggression from Canada has been so palpable that it's very, very difficult to forget how they have levied these charges against India. They've accused India of all kinds of things without an iota of proof. Do you think, I've asked this to the other panelists as well, that Canada needs to set the record straight before India can try and establish, because we really don't need Canada, it's perhaps the Canadians who need us more?
True. I mean, so India is indispensable to the global economy. There is absolutely no doubt about it. And the Indian-Canadian relations are showing some sort of signs of easing up, some signs of thaw. But the extension of this invite, I think we should not mistake this as improvement, or as Sanjay mentioned, that bonhomie of India-Canada relations. It's more of a pressure from the other partners of the Western allies. India has been a very reliable partner for the rest of the Western countries, and India is also the fourth largest economy with a population of 1.4 billion. So that cannot be ignored. So India's economy is also much larger than many of the G7 invitees themselves. So all of these things cannot be ignored. And India, this was inevitable. The invitation extended to India. This was only a matter of time. But also, Vineet, we also need to take into cognizance, while Mark Carney is, he's effectively somewhere or the other, he's isolated the whole Niger allegations, as it was brought up in the press conference by various news outlets. And this is a complete U-turn from his predecessor. In addition, the other thing that we need to take note of is that the Canadian Parliament at this point, the Canadian Cabinet at this point, does not have a single Khalistani representative, which is a very, very different takeaway from the previous regime which was in place. And Sanjay also mentioned about the discussion between Anita Anand and Dr. Jaishankar, which happened over the course of the last 2 weeks, which was basically the foundation for this particular invitation to be extended. We also need to see what happened after that. The moment the Canadian terrorists and the extremists got to know about this, the first thing they were doing is, taking social media to basically attack Miss Anand. And as a consequence, we've also seen a lot of demonstrations outside in Ottawa and various other places in Canada with the news of Canada extending the invite to Prime Minister Modi. So it'll be very interesting to see how these relations, thaw eventually. Right after the Canadian visit, we also hear that Keir Starmer is going to be visiting India to iron out the UK-India FTA. So all of these things coming into play, I think Canada will take it to cognizance of the importance of India. The opposition leader himself, Pierre Poilievre, has also gone into say that this particular visit from Prime Minister Modi is of quintessential importance to India because of its exports of natural gas. And nuclear power, civil nuclear power to India. So it's all on a positive note at this point, Beneath.
Professor Narapat, what should be the Prime Minister's primary focus, when he does get into this huddle with the Canadians for reinstating and re-establishing this relationship?
Look, the G7 has also got some invitees. And I'm sure the Prime Minister will focus on every one of the countries represented there. The United States, for example, will emerge as a major security partner of India in the Indo-Pacific. And frankly, I quite agree with Adit. You cannot ignore India in the Indo-Pacific. That's why Keir Starmer is here, despite the Corbyn lobby, a very strong Corbyn lobby in his party that's still active. So the reality is, frankly, that as far as Indo-Pacific security is concerned, as far as the new threat is concerned, and that new threat, I mean, frankly, is in the Indo-Pacific. It covers the Pacific very, very clearly, and Canada is a Pacific country. Canada is very interested in the Indo-Pacific. So from all points of view, and may I remind you, Vineet, this is a fight versus terror. And you see, look at the situation in Punjab. The people of Punjab are prosperous, they're doing well, and they have no desire to let Punjab fall into the abyss that it did in the 1980s with the K group gaining the upper hand over the rest of the population. And I think it's very important to note that this is a very welcome step forward. It's a very bold position, political decision taken by Mark Carney. First of all, not to include any K elements in his cabinet. And secondly, to ignore this kind of noise coming from terrorist elements. So I personally feel that this is a fight of terror and those who are the victims of terror. And that is frankly the binary that needs to be stressed. And the Prime Minister will stress economic bonds, he'll stress this binary, and he'll stress multiple binaries that bind India, a very large and growing economy, to all these countries who are represented in the G7, including the G7 plus. I mean, those who are invited as guests, that is Prime Minister Modi. I think this will be the 7th consecutive visit that the Prime Minister is paying to G7. I think that's a testament to the importance of India within the G7. I think it's also a testament to the importance of G20, where India is playing a very pivotal role, especially the champion of the Global South. I've never considered China part of the Global South, both in terms of GDP and in terms of geographical positioning. It's not part of the Global South. India is very much a part of the Global South, and the PM in the G20 is extremely active, and I think that is why, frankly, Mark Carney took a very pragmatic decision, and for that I applaud his political courage in standing up to the K group, standing up to terrorists, and I think it's a welcome sign that there will be security cooperation, because we do need security cooperation. There are recruitments going on in some parts of some states in India to send people to Canada and make sure that they get visas. I'm sure Mark Carney will put a stop to all that. I mean, and will not allow people who are being recruited in this fashion or to come there, or will not allow people to groom them, even if they're not fully groomed as yet. That used to happen freely under Justin Trudeau. He gave free hand to all of that. I think Mark Carney, I think in my view, is a different sort of person. He has no externality, any external issue that will hold him back, and he only supports the welfare of Canada, as Prime Minister Modi supports the welfare of India, and the welfare of both countries is definitely bound together. Thank you, Vidi.
Absolutely. Ambassador Fabian, concluding thoughts from you and the rest of the panelists, sir. India obviously has the issue of terrorism and the Khalistanis plotting against India all the time. How is that likely to be resolved if there is a likely reset?
Well, we should expect the Khalistanis to stage demonstrations, and also we should take note of the fact that when asked during the course of the press conference, Carney refused to answer the question whether government of India was responsible for the Niger killing. And mind you, that too happened in the month of June. So Niger's ghost will be very much there. But on the whole, this is a very good news that Canada and India have started a reset. It is a good step in the right direction. But the road ahead is not that short, and both countries should work together so that we move forward, knowing well that there are Khalistanis and others. And when I say others, I mentioned about that liberal MP. For example, he wants reopening of the Kanishka bombing. Well, I was in Canada at that time as acting High Commissioner. And you know what he wants? He wants to argue, or he has submitted a petition saying that government of India was responsible for it. So, we have problems with some of the MPs in the ruling Liberal Party. We should take note of that. But I'm sure that the Prime Minister Modi will be able to present India's case in a powerful and convincing way, and there will be much progress.
Fair enough,
but
sir.
as I said, the road ahead
You're right, sir.
is not too short.
Absolutely. Mr. Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, is also joining us at this point in time to talk about this. Mr. Sibal, appreciate you being here, sir. So do you see a difference in Mark Carney's approach towards India compared to that of his predecessor, Justin Trudeau?
Well, there's bound to be, because Justin Trudeau was a particular kind of personality, extremely woke in his thinking and behavior, and he was very much wedded to the Khalistani backers of his. And at that time, since he was in a coalition government, he was dependent on Jagmeet Singh's NDP to survive, since he was a minority government, in fact. Plus, of course, what he had inherited from his own father, who also was very close to the Khalistani lobbies. Now, Mike Carney, as you know, he's from a different background, although he's from the same party. He was governor of the Bank of England. He is, how should I say, he's no longer dependent on Jagmeet Singh and the NDP. In fact, Jagmeet Singh personally lost the election, and he's no longer a kingmaker. So his hands are freer. And since he is now working on a fresh slate, he can take initiatives vis-a-vis India, which his predecessor could not do because he was far too committed politically and otherwise to the pro-Khalistan lobby in Canada.
And so, should India then seek a reset on ties with Canada based on status quo, or stay firm on demanding more action against Khalistanis?
We're bound to ask that. And I think, hopefully, Mike Carney would be more receptive. Though, of course, there is a big internal issue in Canada, which he also cannot ignore, which is that although NDP and Jagmeet Singh may be out of the running, but the Khalistani lobby is very powerful in the street, especially. Not only that, they have, in a sense, they're vital for winning elections for any party in several constituencies where the Sikh population is very large. So all the political parties woo them. Even the Conservatives were wooing them. Even Podier was wooing these parties. And then there is this entire issue of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, which is still there and cannot be brushed aside by the Canadian politicians, whatever they may think otherwise, because of local pressures. So I think he has now the scope and the space to begin to mend the relationship with India, and for that he has to satisfy us on our concerns. I mean, they may have their local political concerns because his predecessor messed up the entire Nijjar thing. Till today they have not produced any evidence that anybody was from the Indian side was involved. And the fact is that on the ground, as we have repeatedly said, that these elements are violent, they are linked to terrorism and drug trafficking and human trafficking, and they need to be controlled. And I think this is becoming more and more evident. But yet, they are a pretty violent force in Canada, even if they are in a minority. And as I said, they cannot be easily ignored by the ruling parties because of vote bank politics. But I think Canada is beginning to realize that they are paying a big price because of the effective breakdown of ties with India. India is not that much bothered as Canada is, and one can see from the manner in which Mike Carney has reached out to our Prime Minister, made a personal call, inviting him to the G7 summit. I also heard Poliev also make a comment to the effect that India is the fifth largest economy. There's a lot of potential for building a relationship, economic ties with India. He in fact said that Canada can sell a lot of gas to India and can also cooperate in the civilian nuclear sector. As you know, the Canadian pension funds have invested very heavily in India, and despite the deterioration of ties, the pension funds have not moved up. So I think they have an opportunity to improve ties with India, and the invitation to our Prime Minister is the first step. It is unusual for one who's presiding the G7 summit to personally ring up the head of government of a country to invite him, but in this case, given the background of ties, I think he had to do that in order to make sure that our Prime Minister was receptive to the invitation.
Well, sir, do you then see Carney's invite to the Prime Minister for G7 as a significant step in an attempt to reset ties, or is it just, a formal invite?
No. It's not a formal invite. There are several reasons behind this. One, of course, Canada's own national interest, and they're beginning to realize that they are losing out. All the other G7 countries are reaching out to India in a very big way. In fact, they're expanding their ties with India, economic and political and strategic ties with India. It's Canada that is an odd country out. That's first. Number two, Canada is now under great pressure from the United States, as you know. In fact, Trump has been very aggressive politically towards Canada, even denying it. It's even wanting to deny its independence. So they need to reach out to other partners in order to get more space for themselves and reduce, if they can, their dependence on the United States of America. They need international partners, and India stands out in this regard. Number three, I think, although Canada is presiding the G7, but they don't own the G7. And so if for the last 5 years or more, our Prime Minister has been invited to the G7 summits, then Canada not inviting would appear that they are going against the wishes and priorities of the other partners who have equal stakes in the G7 and in the India relationship. So clearly there has also been pressure from other G7 countries not to leave India out. And then, as has been acknowledged by Mike Carney, that G7 agenda is heavily focused on expanding ties with the developing countries, with the global south, and has recognized that without India it would be very difficult to pursue these priorities in the global south. And the fact that under its G20 presidency, India in fact tried to, in a sense, assume the leadership of the global south, and effectively so. Therefore, not inviting India would be a blow to the G7 agenda, and other partners, other members of the G7 would realize that. I think there are many factors that have gone into the decision that has been taken by Mike Carney.
And sir, do you expect Canada to take steps against Khalistani extremists anytime soon?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think we will have to see how they handle the agitations that will inevitably take place when Prime Minister goes there. This whole business about freedom of speech, we've seen it also in the case of the UK. They've been allowing demonstrations against our High Commission on the ground that they can't suppress freedom of speech. This is an argument which the Americans also use and the Canadians, of course, use. They have, in fact, gone far beyond anybody else in allowing these lobbies to threaten physically our High Commissioner, other members of our diplomatic missions there, our consulates, and our Prime Minister, taking out effigies and burning the effigies of the Prime Minister. They had that float in which they celebrated the assassination of Mrs. Gandhi. So they are out of hand and they're attacking Hindu temples. So we'll have to see how they control the inevitable agitations that will take place in the streets and what they say about this. Personally, I don't think they will, at this stage, take head-on these elements who are playing a very, how should I say, nefarious role from our point of view in Canadian politics. But it is not a bilateral visit in that sense. It is a G7 meeting. It just is that Canada is the host. Now, for example, in a different context, we had the G20 meeting. Of course, Canada is a member of the G20, but we had very tense ties with Justin Trudeau, but he came for the G20 summit. So it is normal for our Prime Minister to accept the invitation and go, because it is a G7 invitation. Canada is simply the conduit of this invitation, since they are presiding or chairing this G7.
Sir, appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much. On that note, we're dipping into a short break. Be right back.